Kia ora koutou, welcome to Lunch on the Way. I'm Joey, joined by Jonathan and Graeme, and it's been a while.
It really has, isn't it?
It's been too long.
It's been way too long,
man.
It's been a month since we last sat down in the room together. We talked to Sam Burrows last time, but that was on Zoom.
That's right,
Yep.
and that was on Zoom.
Yep.
And then that hadn't been a while, because I was down in Christchurch. I had another, May was really busy for me.
Been a long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey Sam, your hair's looking great, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to make a correction. So in the episode with Sam, I mentioned we'll have his new podcast in the show notes and in the podcast description.
Oh, yeah.
He hasn't published it yet.
Oh, okay.
I like these things take a lot longer.
It's going to
than
be
you
good,
think.
though.
It's going to be good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
But once again, that podcast, the episode we did with Sam. 2 weeks ago, it's already like fourth all time.
Oh, is that
crazy.
right? What is it about?
Yeah.
I don't know what's with Sam. He's just got such a pull. I think what happens is people at your church, Jonathan, in St. Augustine's, they listen to this thing, and then whenever, well, they don't listen. They have it on their shows that show up on their app.
Yeah.
And then when Sam's name comes up,
They
they're
all
like,
they all
I
listen.
wonder what's happening with Sam.
He doesn't look quite the Jesus look like he had, though, is it?
No, not
Or what
quite.
we might perceive as Jesus, because we really don't know what he looked like. But
He's more
shorter hair. He's sort of cut his hair.
professional Jesus.
Oh, Australian Jesus? I don't know.
He's going to be loving this. Not.
I don't.
So what else is happening, fellas?
Yeah.
What else is going on?
Yeah.
Not much. There's some things happening in my life that I won't announce yet,
cool,
but
cool.
I'm sure I will. in
Exciting
the course
stuff,
of
though.
time.
Exciting
that's
stuff.
really good.
Exciting stuff
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Other than that, this morning Audrey slept in 11 and a half hours.
Oh,
man.
wow.
Not that that's
Kicking
like
goals.
abnormal, but
Do you think I
it's
could
always
rob her
nice.
a few hours? Because I've got this jet lag thing going on. I'm past 2 in the morning. I'm
True.
wide awake.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
crazy, mate.
But Jonathan, what's your update? And
Don't
then
ask me.
then
I've
we'll
got
go-
no updates.
None.
This is my highlight, so let's get into it. Yeah.
All right. Well, Graeme
Yeah.
was in the U.S.
Yep.
We're going to get right into it here,
Okay.
folks. No more banter.
Yeah.
We suck at it.
Yeah.
Graeme was in the U.S. because he went to an
Media Ecology Conference.
Media Ecology
called-
Conference.
Yeah, so the Media Ecology Association is an organisation, and they do a convention once a year, which is a conference. They produce a journal too.
Okay.
Are you going to be published in it?
Well, I could publish in it, but not
from that conference.
Not from that conference, no.
So give us the background a little bit. How did you end up there, and why were you there?
Okay, so in 2023, I intended to go, but because I got cancer, that knocked the year out, and so I couldn't go. I had a friend who, let me go back one step. Because of my PhD, I used as a theorist Marshall McLuhan, the famous sort of meme that the medium is the message, which says a whole lot. And I used him in that. So this media ecology is really around. It's not just him; it's Neil Postman too, coming out of I think one of the New York universities. So the people that have gathered around him, and they're really kind of making. How does technology shape us? The way in which we use it, the way it makes us. So we often think of what it does for us, but we don't think how it might reshape us. And so that's kind of the whole media ecology sort of group. They sort of, Neil Postman, the kind of students that have been of Neil Postman now, they're and they've formed this association, and then they may come together once a year. So I think this organisation's been going for about 25 years. Wow. It's not big.
How many people were in the conference space?
I would say about 100.
100? Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's not huge.
No. So you're friends with everyone now.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I made some great connections. What's really interesting, too, is that just there's quite a number of Christians in this. When I say that, people from Protestants, Catholic, and some ones that I kind of roomed with were Orthodox, Canadian Orthodox.
Interesting.
Roomed with them?
Well, we're in the same sort of loungy area, so there's 4 bedrooms off, and we live in the same sort of quarter.
Do you have any icons?
Well, yeah. So they were.
McLuhan was Catholic, though, wasn't he?
What's that?
McLuhan was
was
Catholic.
definitely Catholic.
Yeah, and his Catholicism kind of shaped his.
Yeah, well,
his,
I think that's what sort of
scholarship a
got
little bit,
me
right?
thinking a lot more about Catholicism as well,
Right.
and appreciating the scholarship and scholastic, in Catholic theology and philosophy.
Yeah.
So they do really think about this stuff more than Protestants.
Yeah.
And so, McLuhan converted to Catholicism. Interesting enough, I met a young guy. I should send him this podcast.
And the question would be, why is that the case? But anyway, that's another question for another day.
Guy,
that's another
28 years old, studying to be a priest.
Yeah.
So I've communicated him since.
We're off topic already.
No, it's all right.
But this is interesting.
Into it.
Is that he? So he went to Wheaton College. He came from an evangelical sort of charismatic Pentecostal sort of church, and he's converted to Catholicism. Right. And part of that journey of Catholicism there was his studying communication. And he said, I said, what was the tipping point? He said, myself and my friend, another guy that was with him, we both went to Germany and started looking at this stuff, and obviously studied McLuhan as well. And he said, it just became sort of obvious to me this was the way to go. So,
was to be a priest.
To be a Catholic priest.
I'll tell you what.
He converted to Catholicism, and he's on that journey.
God calls people in many different ways.
I mean,
yeah,
some of these
media
guys,
ecology.
I was some of these guys
exactly.
are just, look how old I am, and I'm just starting, and these guys are just sharp as a tack. It's like, my goodness. Oh. Anyway, so what do you...
No, that's good. One side note, Wheaton College used to be Wesleyan.
Oh, did it?
In tradition.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
That's our claim in the history books of the Wesleyan Church of Canada.
Where are they
US.
placed now? Where would you place them?
I don't know. I think interdenominational or non-denominational.
Okay.
But Methodist roots into
they were generally known as quite, as I understood them to be quite, not sort of conservative evangelical, the kind of British evangelical. They're kind of widely evangelical.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely a wide.
Yeah.
What do you call it?
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, so Graeme, you're at this conference. Well, first you fly to Vancouver, then you fly
come into the Vancouver, which is a long haul. It's a grueling flight.
Good.
You've done that one. Then I'm on a plane to Portland, and I'm staying with the Morses. Mary Kate Morse is runs part of the doctoral program for George Fox University. So Karen Kemp's supervisor and doing her
who we interviewed,
ministry.
Karen Kemp.
So that was really helpful. She gave me several books, one sitting on here. It's the first book I've come across. It's called Making Room for Leadership, Power, Space and Influence. I thought it was I've started reading it. It's the only book I've ever come across that's talked about power and leadership. Nice. So that was a helpful start. We won't go into that. Then I went to Seattle and stayed with a supervisor for 3-4 days, caught up with them, and then I flew to Detroit through to Buffalo and spent 4 or 5 days in Buffalo at this conference.
And before we get into the meat and potatoes of your thoughts from the conference, and we'll just riff on them. What was your impression of the U.S.?
Well,
because you had only really been on the West Coast flying through.
Well,
once before.
I had been to the U.S. about 21 years ago. Actually, it was just before the 9/11.
Okay, very different America.
yeah, it's a very different America. Obviously the West Coast is very different to the East Coast. My impression of LA, it's a concrete jungle. I couldn't live there.
No.
San Diego is quite nice.
Good weather though, eh?
Well,
like
it was quite misty and
June gloom.
Yeah.
So what was my impression? When I arrived in Portland with the people I was staying, the first thing they said to me, "Have you heard the news?" I said, What news is that? And this will just describe something of what I experienced there. Donald Trump has been he's a felon. He's been convicted on all accounts. Mm-hmm. So admittedly, you've got in at least Portland, but probably for Oregon and Washington and California and probably New York where I was, I'm really in the Democratic sort of space. Mm-hmm. But what I felt, so I just want to put that around it, but what I picked up really was the level of anxiety, political anxiety, around their whole politics. Shocked would be a bit of overstatement, but I couldn't avoid it. The anxiety about what? The anxiety was, if Trump gets in, he will dismantle the legislative. There was it was really a nervousness about the narcissism of Trump and what might happen and where was America going. Mm-hmm. So I found that quite even to the point where, I won't sort of name, but there was sort of at one place where some family members would actually exit the country if Trump got in.
That was the rhetoric they're using, which is what they said last time, and no one moved.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay. Yeah. And mind you do get that here too. You do get that. But so there was this sort of, and if I'd had it one place, that'd be fine. But I counted it in all 4 places that I went. All a nervousness and an anxiety about the political situation.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So that was what you're kind of feeling a little bit going on.
Yeah.
There.
So that's political anxiety, and I think the other thing was, my goodness me, this is a massive place, a lot of people, and New Zealand, we're little wee islands down the bottom of the South Pacific. We're only 5 million people. We are, we're a flicker on the screen. We just. And yet we seem to feel like when we live here that we have something to say to the world. I don't know. It's just...
I know.
It's really kind of... When you go out, you go, oh, you got no idea. This, we're small, so...
Yeah, it's expansive.
Yeah.
All right, so you got some notes, Graeme. Let's just jump right into it.
So the last... there were lots of good stuff, but I'm still processing what... I heard.
We'll have to process, mate.
We'll process it.
One I heard, and I've emailed him because I just wanted to get his paper and just go over it again, because he was talking about social media and misinformation.
Oh, yeah.
And that misinformation was around, I think he was a professor at Manhattan University in communication and rhetoric. And he talked a lot about the AI and the level of misinformation, and how at this point in time, I can remember him saying to me, if you think what you saw with the storming of the Capitol back when the last election, what is coming is terrifying. Now that sounds really apocalyptic, but that's what he said to me, and I kind of went. I've talked to you, Joey, trying to put this in context. Is this just American rhetoric? Is this the way they are?
I said that both sides of the spectrum in the U.S. are both deeply conspiratorial.
Yeah.
At its core, I even think there's a theory
and that's a good point,
that the revolution itself was quite conspiratorial against the British government. Not to say not all of it was true, but to say that it was definitely blown very far out of proportion as to what the government in England was actually doing compared to what was stated that they were doing. Anyway, so I think the rhetoric is more hyperbolic. Because of those reasons, potentially. Yeah. But anyway, so what was going on with the statement?
Well, he was just. It was that sort of where is America going? What does this mean? And particularly for a person that I don't live in America, but we're all affected by the politics of America, one way or another, in the world that we live in, and so this was, your media and the way in that media would be triffed and state actors working on there, but also the divide between the right and the left, and the way people were siphoning off into those two groups. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what his big concern was, and the reality of what is actually true. Nobody really knows.
Yeah. So if we just jump on that a little bit, so the AI creating disinformation or creating more polarization is what this person was worried about.
Yes, more polarization. People, running on those conspiracy. Now, I've been listening to The Rest Is History and what you listened to a little while ago, and so I picked up on that. Yeah, just how conspirators, perhaps elements of the revolution were in perceptions, and perceptions is,
it's truth to a certain extent.
Perceptions are powerful. Yeah. What we perceive is what shapes us. Yeah. So that helps put that in context. Yeah. I think the one
did he have a solution for it? I mean, what was his take on it?
That's what I'd like to have a conversation.
Oh, okay, yeah, cool.
Was he just like, all right, everyone, we're screwed?
I mean, he was very articulate, but he was very.
Was he pessimistic about what was coming?
He wasn't hopeful.
Yeah,
he wasn't hopeful.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about in that podcast about a Christian hopefulness, affordable.
You need to bring the
because
hope.
We can sink into this sort of desperation. Oh, it's all doom and gloom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's every single generation, or every few decades, or every decade, it seems like now, there's an existential crisis that really paints the future in very bleak terms. Yep. And we don't quite literally, you go back thousands of years. it stays true. Yet we would say from our perspective, oh, they were crazy.
Yeah.
So what makes it different this time? Yeah. That this is actually an existential threat. Yeah.
And the difference here may be what we'll come back to is technology, right? The reach of technology, to be able to shape all the world in one go.
That's it.
Where before, I mean, you just couldn't reach that far. So you could have pockets that were thinking completely differently, and civilizations that were rising up in different places with completely different worldviews and different ways of thinking about the world. Mm-hmm. Some hopeful, some not. But technology shapes the whole of the world for us, and therefore the whole of the world starts thinking in similar patterns. That's different.
Yes, we're all connected. I mean, McLuhan's line, it's I think quite an interesting one, is that the whole human nervous system has now been extended into the internet.
Right. Yeah.
Which is frightening. Yeah. I would suggest that's why we have so much anxiety and mental health issues. Right. I mean, not the only reason, but I think it's a big
contributing factor.
A very big contributing factor. So the last planetary session I was at was quite. It was quite stimulating. There were other ones. I think I mentioned you the day before. I won't say the word, but he was really very negative about the whole tech sector, and just basically caving and making money and manipulating people. He was extremely negative. Right. I'm not sure what you could say out of that. The one that I thought was interesting.
Can I just ask? Were they having people zooming into this?
No.
Okay.
This was incarnational, Jonathan.
That's what I wanted to know.
It wasn't. It was just. Yeah.
No, there was because they're listening if you're on Zoom.
There was no streaming into it. No, it wasn't. Yeah. I think he was sort of one of these sort of person that was about injustice, and that's what he was going for. He was going for the tech, Google, Amazon, Apple, the way in which they're basically crudely screwing people.
Well, this is the thing. This raises a question of how much responsibility is on us as individuals and how much responsibility is on the entity of the corporation itself. Because I'm like, we all opted into this. No one forced us to do anything. It was really just social compulsion that made us go online, get a Gmail account, go on Facebook, get Twitter/X or whatever it's called now. Right. But once we're in, we can't really see a world out of it, though. Yeah, that's right. So I think the responsibility.
Well, he said the promises they make actually broken. Right. Yeah, and the constant brand. I'll say the line. I'm not putting swear words, but he used the word shitification. He used it numerous times.
That's an academic word.
Yeah. I thought it took me a while to grace. Could
you
pause
that out for us?
No, yeah. That was his description of what he saw going on. I thought, oh, okay. Yeah. So the other one was, the other one that
this might be the first time we get beeped.
No, I'll keep it up.
The other one, the title of this, which is interesting. He spoke on, this guy Corey Anton spoke on humanity, time-bending, wealth, and superabundance.
Okay. Say it again.
Humanity, time-bending, wealth, and superabundance. So he made this argument that humans are unique, but the way he described how humans are unique was not necessarily a theological sort of unpacking. Maybe a sociological, I don't know. Right.
Oh, that's probably an important point. I just thought we were thinking this is a theological...
No.
So we have to point out that this was not a theological kind of symposium or whatever, right?
This was a secular...
that's probably
where you've got communication academics together.
Got you, okay.
This is a revolution against the tech giants.
Yeah,
so they're thinking, they're professors and students, PhD students that are gathering to talk about communication, which had fallen into grappling with McLuhan and Postman and the media ecology sort of thing. That's the part I found really fascinating, that how many people, a collection of these people and how they were thinking. So in this, I'll make a couple of comments and then you can ask questions because I don't want to talk too much, but he sort of talked a little bit about humans are unique, and he talked a little bit about this notion of, he said they're unique in their time bending. And I could, what do you mean by time bending? Well, he talked about plants as in chemical time bending. They gather chemicals and that. And then he talked about animals were space bending, about territory. But he said humans are time bending. I gather what I think he means by that is that we build on our knowledge over time. And here's the part that I'm not sure I agree with, but he said that actually what's unique about humans is they create wealth. Wealth is the defining thing.
Okay.
Yeah, well, that's interesting.
That's a bit
reductionistic. That's what I thought so too.
Yeah.
But he says wealth makes humans unique.
No.
Well, I don't think so, but okay, putting out what he said.
Yeah.
Then he said it's that the kind of connective, and potential. So the connective, I'm trying to pronounce the word as CONNECTIC. Kinetic, that's the word. Getting my mouth around that.
Isn't that okay?
No, connectic is right. Yeah.
Connect.
He's making up a new word.
Yeah.
Connectic.
Which I never heard this word before. So that's sort of all these, that sort of use or value is the practices and systems and techniques. And then he talked about the sort of potential values, which is kind of artifacts like building, railways and everything like that. So he's trying to make that separation between actually processes and systems and techniques. Yeah. And he used that to sort of then go in to talk a little bit about this idea. And I thought this was interesting. He talked about 5 revolutions. Now, we can divide time up in all sorts of ways, and as people do. Yeah. But his ones were this. 50,000 years ago, you got what we call the cognitive revolution.
50,000 years ago.
We're talking about like Neanderthals,
a cognitive
like modern humans,
revolution.
Probably.
He's saying that language is formed. Language, human.
Okay.
That's what I'll throw it out, and then you can you can bounce against it. Then he said about 10,000 years ago, we've got agricultural revolution. So I guess the environment and all the rest of it. And then he said the industrial revolution, which we're now about sort of 200-300 years away. Printing press, the kind of, we know all about the industrial revolution. Mm-hmm. And then he said this, and this is the part that got me kind of thought, oh, that's interesting. He talked about the digital revolution. I thought digital revolution is what we're talking about in the 1990s, computers and that. He likened that back to the 1950s.
Okay.
1950s, 1960s. And there's a lot they talked about there. We don't get sidetracked there. And then he talked about generative AI revolution that he put on the date was 2017. And that's the one that we're in now. And he talked about that as this idea of the pushing the button. Everything is pushing the button. It's all kind of seamless and effortless. And the notion here of what we call superabundance, that everything's connected. What else did he say here? Ease of convenience. So he's saying that, the haves, the have-nots, and the haves. So the have-nots have a lot more than they ever did have. Mm-hmm. So it's a sort of superabundance. So he said, while it offers a lot of positivity, there's a dark side to it as well. So you get and you lose. Mm-hmm. And I think that was kind of interesting about, the way he sort of played that out. I'm trying to think of some of the illustrations that he does. He talked about frictionless life, and the way in which we saw an example like, why would I have a relationship with somebody? Because I can just use AI. I can have a go to porn and have I can meet my sexual needs that way. Why would I? And that's playing into this. He gave that as one example. He gave other examples of the way in which we can short circuit, human life by we just can stay home and amuse ourselves. So he said that that the AI it's about to absolutely revolutionize us in ways that we have no imagination to how far it's going to go. Right. So that was quite interesting. So the superabundance is we've got more of everything. Yeah. More than any human being has ever experienced, we will be in this position. So he said for developing countries that's going to be wonderful, but for developed countries that's going to be difficult. Right. No, you'd have to explore that because he was just popping out bits and pieces to say that. So you might want to sort of respond to some of that. What was some of these?
Let's leave that there. Let's stop there for a bit.
Okay.
When you're summarizing the high points of some of these talks right now, I'm understanding why you really need a robust theological anthropology. Like because when he mentioned there that people will just pursue leisure activities or have an abundance or not want to have a relationship with actual people and choose the path of least resistance. Yeah, that is certainly human nature to one sense, but another sense is, and I do see this pushing this happening in society now, is the call to adventure, where it assumes that people, when they have nothing to do, will continue to want to do nothing to do, if that makes sense. Where I don't think that's true. I think people will not. I don't think that picture of the future will come about in that regard.
No, here's a comment, and this was interesting. In the conference at the beginning of it, there were a few PhD students putting their thing forward. I can't remember what the second person, this girl, said, but she raised the question, and I thought that was a really important question. What does it mean to be human?
Yeah, it's a pretty fundamental one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Funny enough, at the end of the conference, the last sort of session I went to, that question was raised once again. Yeah, and I just thought, isn't that interesting? Sort of this include, the beginning and the end. It was a framing. I just thought, noted, and I made the observation, and I stated it. I said, isn't it interesting that this question was said at the beginning of the conference, and we've actually landed here where that question's now also being asked and wrestled with.
Yeah, that's interesting, because all the stuff that he said. Who cares if you can't answer what it is to be human? Because it doesn't matter what the human becomes if you don't think it's straying from any kind of path,
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah,
who cares?
Yeah.
We'll just see what we make of the human being. If we can just keep on making ourselves.
Personally, I think that's the key question.
It is.
With technology,
it is
that you have to ask
that
question. And how do you ask that question? Interesting. One of the guys in the last session,
that is an interesting
young
question.
PhD student, and and somebody said to him, So what does it mean to be human? And he said, well, I'm Christian.
Right.
And he said, and so I would go to be made in the image of God. And I think you have to unpack what that means. But I thought he was brave, candid, and wanting to put his faith on the line. That's as in, he was very respectful in the way that he did that. But I thought that was an interesting thing. Yeah.
I'd come back to that wealth.
Yeah, I thought that when I heard that, I thought, really?
Yeah,
I don't think so.
Yeah, I can. I don't know what he was thinking, but I can probably half go along with that.
Yeah,
because if you take wealth as meaning, that humans are people that like to be rich in meaning. So we accumulate stuff that means something to us.
Yeah.
Now that's where I would probably want to push that.
That's where you went, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes complete sense.
Meaning and purpose. So,
and if he's pushing out that the meaning that we find as in our current climate is monetary.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably true. The meaning that we think makes life meaningful is money. Then I'd say wealth is probably something human. Is that because our deepest desire is to make meaning in life?
Well, that's what he said with the superabundance. Yeah, that actually the dark side of that is, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. And then it comes back to, okay, but is that what it is to be truly human? Wealth, monetary wealth. Because over centuries that hasn't always been the case. So I can kind of go along with that.
Well, these guys are not. I don't know where. The interesting part is just how much Christianity floats into this stuff. Yeah, it's sort of in and out.
Yeah.
So one of the guys is he's Jewish,
right?
So and Jewish to the extent that he sort of looked after the synagogue.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if I should say this on them, but I was walking across the road going to a restaurant for these guys, and this is the kind of space you're in. They're really decent guys and very warm and inviting. And I'm walking across the road because we're going to this restaurant in the evening. We'd been to a art museum gallery, and they have the smoke.
Yeah.
And I'm going, that smells funny. Oh, Graeme, you want to? What's a joint? And we're just walking across the pedestrian crossing. I kind of, in a way, it was sort of surprised me. I thought, that's, and they were sharing the joint around.
So people at the conference.
Yeah, there's a group of these guys.
What kind of ecology conference is this?
Yeah, that's sort of like, I mean, the New York. I mean, I think, some of them are New Yorkers too.
Yeah,
it's so.
Yeah. That's when I went to the States in 2011, hanging out with drugs. Drugs was a massive thing. Like they were like, you know how mushrooms has come quite big. It's quite
psychedelics.
Psychedelics that was massive amongst in the States way before it got here. Yeah.
I was just a little bit shocked. Graeme, they're just walking across the road, and I'm a bit naive. I've never smoked dope in my life, never want to. But it was just, do you want to pay? No, I'm all good.
Yeah,
So that's it's this sort of, you've got this middling of kind of Christians in that too. They're not smoking dope, but are actually quite committed. So the Catholics are there. There's a Catholic priest there. That's part of an important part of that. So it's an interesting space.
Did anyone there? Was anyone there positive about technology? Did they see it as enhancing human? Whatever they take to be human, and because it sounds quite negative at this point.
No, the plenary sessions, the one night, that night of the plenary session, when I said to the guy, described that, he was really negative. And another guy with me, who was a Christian guy, said, I don't like this guy. Right, okay. Because it was quite negative. Okay. The guy, Corey Anton, that spoke, he wasn't, and he said, I'm not a Luddite. Right. I use the stuff. Yeah. But what they're trying to say is, look, we there are flips and sides of this. It's not the case that but we need to think about what's going on and how it's making us. That's which is what I've always been saying anyway. Yeah. Which some of my stuff can look pretty negative too. Yeah. But that's part of a polemic to wake people up.
It's kind of that side of it.
Yeah. Right. So they were talking about education, the way how that works, how students, can look for information but not critically thinking. How do we get around some of that? Yes. What was other stuff? Like I say, I was still trying to process some of it. One guy he was a Christian guy. He was a lovely guy, but he's a novelist. Oh yeah. And so he's writing stories. So he gave me one of his storybooks about 2021-01. Okay. And about one he's written about the AI, and now he's writing one about sort of pre-AI, journeying into it. So that was his sort of response.
Wow, that's interesting.
He'd worked for the Lausanne. He was part of the setup of the Lausanne. He'd become a little bit sort of kind of disillusioned with that as well. Wow. And then he worked for the American Bible Society, but felt like that the Media Ecology had really opened him up to thinking about, we're not talking about the stuff we need to talk about. He felt quite passionate about that.
Was anyone talking about the way technology is made? I mean, for us to be a technological society, you've got to mine the minerals out of the earth, and then to mine the minerals out of the earth, you're often doing that on indigenous land. Was anyone talking into that kind of area?
I did talk about some social justice stuff. Yeah. That was mainly not about the ecological thing so much. It was much more about, as I recall, it was about it was a bit about race, I think. And there, again, I have to look at my stuff. Yeah. I do remember at one point thinking, gosh, this is definitely kind of more the New York left side of things here. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, interesting. But they didn't talk about that. And interesting, there were people from South America there. So the next conference is in Mexico City.
Oh, interesting.
You got to go to that one, Graeme.
Yeah.
Well, Mexico City, yeah.
Yeah, because when we talk about media ecology, a part of that, ecology.
Yeah, that's
in its own right.
That's right.
those two things interact.
They weren't just talking about. They were talking about. He talked about the way
the amount of power
technologies that we had have changed us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have really changed us. Yeah. Have really shifted the way that we see the world. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, there are also, we know very well. I don't know, I grew up with, my mother had a wringer, washing machine and a wringer. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't even remember that. Yeah. She'd wash the stuff and you'd push it through the wringer. Yeah. And then they got an automatic washing machine, There weren't dishwashers. How that's changed. There weren't microwaves. Yeah. It's all just there now, and it's changed our lives.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
I think that question, that bookended the conference. We already mentioned it. The "what does it mean to be human" thing is incredibly valid, clearly from a theological perspective. But I my sense is, maybe you can confirm this, is those who weren't Christian in the room were kind of doing their own self-projection of what it meant to be human, or like, where was the source material for their understanding of humanity? Because
I don't know if a lot of anthropology was going on in the.
No, certainly.
But I didn't attend all the sessions either. I could only choose some that I went to. That was bouncing around in the background, and I kept wanting to say, that's the question we need to be asking, which I don't know. I'm not sure you can answer that question really well unless you start to go to theology and philosophy.
No, you can't. And this is when you mentioned how, what was it, the 28-year-old guy who asked the question? It was the young guy, the young priest who did the... this girl, she would have been...
The girl. Yeah, she was she was a PhD student. I can't remember what she was doing, but she asked these questions in terms of what they were doing. There were three of them, and what they were working on. And I can't even remember that. I just remember the question that she raised the question. And that hit me. Because that's the one that I've thought about.
Well, that question is so much more valid, and people recognize its validity more now than they have maybe in the past 20 years. Because people know, they're like, well, where's your source material for your assumptions of what a human is? It's like, well, it's self-evident. Or it's evolutionary.
It's common sense.
It's common sense. Or
what's that?
Exactly. Or it's evolutionary, and we're just people with desires and survival of the fittest, and everything's based around social constructs. And it's like, well, that's actually not sufficient either.
Yeah, well, let's push that out. Let's see where it leads.
So when someone presents, what it means to be human is to be made in the image of God, yes, unpack that. But that statement a few years ago would have been ridiculed. But now it's like...
It wasn't ridiculed.
It's not ridiculed at all now.
No,
that's been a massive shift.
I think that's true.
Because people I think people clearly sense that there's a lack of meaning that we talk about with Sam, but you actually need a source material for understanding yourself. If I need to reduce it down to that kind of metaphor, because if anything goes, then there's a lack of continuity, and there's a proliferation of disunity amongst people. But if there is a story that says this is what a human is, then we can actually create a framework as we embrace different technology and see what's good and what isn't good.
So what was referred to there, and I can't remember, but there were a few philosophers that I hadn't heard of that they referred to.
Yeah.
Sometimes scripture popped up. So I don't know whether the guy that was he looked after the synagogue, so he's obviously an important person in the synagogue. I think he may have referred to some Old Testament source material.
Yeah, as you would expect.
Yeah.
What I think is, if we shift things maybe to our last 10 minutes or so, how are you going to interact with this emerging technology of AI? Like, how are you interacting with it now? Not the stuff that you are unaware of, because we all are on an unaware level. But how are you actually interacting with it? Because it's like, I think you said previously, maybe in private, Jonathan, that it's inevitable.
No, it's not private.
No, it's not private. It's inevitable.
Oh, it is.
Right.
What?
What's inevitable?
Technology, like the fact that you're going to embrace. Because I think around me lamenting how attached I am to my phone, and I'm not even that attached compared to the average person.
Yeah.
And I hate it. I really do. But I can't avoid it because of just the world we live in. So AI, I hope it's not a situation where it's like, I hate it, but it's unavoidable. How can I actually have a relationship with this piece of technology that is actually more beneficial than a hindrance to who I am? So how are you actually, or how do you think you will actually use it?
That's what I'm thinking.
And how won't you want to use it?
Well, here's an example. My smartphone got me around how many airports and to the places. I would have been lost if I had. I knew there were two things I couldn't lose while I was away. Well, actually, three things. Card, my phone, and my passport.
Yeah.
I'm sunk.
Yeah.
If I lose any one of those three, they were on me all the time.
Right.
In a bag I had on my shoulder. So what does it say about the smartphone? Well, smartphone, that's where I was connecting.
Yeah.
I was WhatsApping Linda every day. I was accessing when the planes were coming, where I had to go to next, the maps, the Ubers. Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
That's AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, myself, you're probably a bit more advanced here, but I said this morning to one of the guys as at breakfast, I was told about this new AI one called Perplex.
You don't need to say it.
Oh gosh, I always get. It's a new one and I downloaded it as an app last night. It's amazing. You just ask it a question, and it will give you the source material where it gets it from. It is unbelievably smart. So and then I was talking to somebody this morning. I said, I've just downloaded. He said, yeah, I've got it. He said, it's amazing.
Right.
So I think, I don't know. I know that we're already using it in ways that I don't know that I'm using it. But more explicitly, what does this look like? How far do I go when is it easy to ask? It's a shortcut to ask. Can you give me an exegesis on Luke, Luke 5, 1 to think, and it would probably do it for me.
Yeah.
The problem is that all this then, as we kind of briefly talked about, what happens to our critical faculties, critical thinking, because we can get there faster.
Yeah.
Don't know. I don't know. What do you think?
I agree. I want to download that app because in the process of doing what I'm doing next, I need to do a lot of research. And so I want to do that quickly. Not to say I want it to do the grunt work for me, do the thinking work for me. I want it to do the grunt work for me. I don't want to have to spend an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours combing through resources. I would love to have at least the first hour or two done immediately, and that will help me a lot. But where I don't want AI and this intelligence technology to impact me is around the creative space. I don't want it to replace what I think I can actually do quite well in a creativity kind of way of looking at it. So, for example, I know that that speaking in front of people and writing a talk or a sermon or a lecture is something that I can do. But if I rely too heavily on AI to do that for me, it will actually hinder my ability to grow in that space. And I think this is a prediction. I think with AI emerging and giving people an out to be more lazy than they otherwise would have been, it will create a scarce economy, if you will, of truly proficient people in different domains. So an example would be if you make it do all your research for you, then the person who can actually do research becomes incredibly valuable, because at this current moment, AI can't do a good enough job to really get to the nuts and bolts of what you need. Or if you're like, well, I want to speak, I need help with how to speak publicly better, or how to write a sermon or a talk better. It's like it's going to give you what people have already done and tell you to use that. Where if somebody's trying to innovate and create things of their own, use their creativity, they become a whole lot more valuable and proficient in that sense, and they are, I think, more sought after in those different domains. So I think the specialization is going to be more important. I think the people who actually put in the hard work and do the hard thinking and do the deep critical thinking are going to be more scarce, but they're going to be more valuable in that regard, because nobody will be doing the thinking, comparatively speaking, from now till, say, 20 years from now.
Well, that was another conversation I had with my cousin-in-law. He was really quite wound up about the loss of critical thinking.
Right.
And he was really he thought that in the US was a real problem in the political arena.
Right.
People aren't critical, and he was quite concerned with that in the church. Not people not thinking critically, and which is a really interesting thing. I've got an idea of writing an article or a paper about that and the need for what kind of congregations in the future will look gospel,
right.
which maybe is congregation that actually and the processes and the practices and that really push the importance of discernment, which what does that look like? The ability to listen to another human being and have a decent conversation.
Yeah.
And a different opposing views, and intelligently pressing each other to come to some sense of understanding. Because I think that's, if we're not critically thinking, then this becomes a problem. I mean, this is McLuhan engaging also with Eric, can't remember his name, he was a classicist at Toronto University, that in the ancient world there was no such thing as truth, just opinion. Right. When I say ancient world, I'm talking about the Greek classical world. It's the rhetoric, how well you can perform. And I think McLuhan says, well, that's kind of the world we're ending back into.
Yeah. So, how about you, Jonathan? What are some of your thoughts? How do you think you're going to use it?
I don't know. It's a tough space. I wonder. I think what's going to be. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I probably would think the opposite.
Oh yeah,
I think critical thinkers won't be needed. I think they'll become obsolete. Wow. Because, I don't think they'll be valued at all. And I think we're already seeing that. You don't need a critical thinker because you can get the stuff done without them.
Yeah.
And because the medium is the message. Technology is an end goal. And you do not need a critical thinker to get to the end goal that's already been decided for you, which is research output in your case. It's not needed, man. So I think that will become obsolete. And we'll just have great researchers that can use the tools properly. Good on you. That's great. And I think creativity will become a god of the gaps.
Wow, that's an interesting one.
So, because critical. We're already talking about creativity like a god of the gaps. It's not really needed. It's nice. I can't really understand it or place my finger on it. And when push comes to shove, I don't really need it. We don't need the creative thinker anymore. So so this sounds quite pessimistic, and probably it is. What gets lost is wisdom. Mm-hmm. Do we need technology to be human? That's a question for discernment and for wisdom, and that takes time. And technology is all about speed. Therefore, you won't become wise. You'll just become fast.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
I'm gonna push back a little bit.
You should.
I think you're right. Yeah. But if we go back to what does it mean to be human, I think, and we talked a lot, a year and a half ago about beauty.
Yeah.
And how humans are deeply attracted to beauty, not just aesthetically, but truth claims about the world and who they are and what resonates with us to reality itself. Yeah. I think you're right that the trajectory and the swing will definitely be towards just get the outputs done. We don't need to think, or we're going to be less wise. But I'll tell you what, if there is a person or people who actually think, actually look at things from a different perspective, actually point to something that is wise and meaningful and pushes against the grain, and people recognize that as beautiful in the sense of it's captivating, then I think those people will be incredibly important. And I think people will be attracted to those people because they'll see the deficit within themselves.
And I agree with that. That's a great pushback, and I agree with that. And then I would also add to that, I think those people won't be useful though.
No, they won't. There'll be prophets that you'll kill, saw in half with a wooden saw like Isaiah.
That's right. And that's right. And look, and this is what I would like to, I think you're right to pick up on beauty. Beauty isn't useful. It's deeply meaningful. And those aren't the same thing.
No, but meaning is useful.
No, it's not. It's the most meaning. It's not meaningful because it's not useful. You don't use it to get an outcome. It gives all your outcomes meaning. That's a completely different thing. It's not useful for anything, but it makes everything you do meaningful.
I think the opposite.
Okay.
I think if we can already see this right now in the last few years of people there's this perceived meaning crisis out there. Yeah. But it's because people are just going through the motions, looking for the outcomes without actually assuming what's behind everything that they do.
Right.
And so the end result actually means nothing if the underlying issue isn't addressed.
100%.
Yeah. So I think that I think meaning is useful, in the sense that it is the motivating factor for what you do for anything.
I don't think I'm talking about meaning. Meaning, of course, meaning isn't useful. It makes sense of what we do. We don't use meaning for an outcome. It undergirds everything. And that's what's been lost. So we are the most busiest society around. Yet we have a meaning crisis. If we could make things that were more useful, we would be the most meaningful society around, yet we're not. Because meaning isn't something that you can manipulate. It's something that undergirds everything that you do. So what I'm saying is that we're not getting meaning it's not a useful thing. It's not another product that we use. It's not another thing that we place on top of our already busy work lives.
Yeah.
It's the thing that gives meaning to all of those things. Therefore, it's the most meaningless thing of all. It's not something we can manipulate. It's something that we need to listen to and find again. And it makes everything that we do from then on meaningful.
Interesting.
That's what beauty is.
I heard coming in the news this morning, which kind of does relate to this, is that surveys on people's happiness at the moment.
Right.
In New Zealand's the outcomes of where New Zealand's at. Australia's no different. Right. The lucky country.
Yeah.
Other places are the same. So what's going on? Yeah. The other part here is a little story, which may be a nice way to finish off.
Yeah, let's finish with the story.
You meet some interesting people, and I love meeting people and finding their. So I'm always asking questions. So I'm in LAX, and I sit down next to this guy. He's probably about 42, about your age, but around your age.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Maybe a bit older, Anyway, I put my foot in there, haven't I? Anyway, I said, what do you do? I work for a dental organisation. I'm an IT person. I said, so what do you do? He said, I oversee 120 people around the world and teams. And I said, He said, what do you do? I said, I've just been to a media conference. Oh, really? We started talking.
Yeah.
And he got really interested, just in back and forth. And did he have family? And we talked about that. And he had a couple of boys. And I said, I've got grandchildren. And I said, what will I say to them in terms of what I've learned, what I'm learning? And I said, the thing I'm going to pass on them is how to work with their hands.
Right.
And he said, oh, that's interesting. Why do you say that? And I said, because the technology that we're using disembodies us. We're losing touch with material world. It was like it was just one of those moments. Because he said to me, he said, I take my boys and when I'm fixing something, I show them what to do. I said, that's pretty cool. Yeah. Anyway, the conversation finishes and it was like he'd missed a best friend. He shook my hand and he said, wow. He said, I gave him my card. He said, this has been the most fascinating. I've got to run to my plane. This has been the most fascinating conversation. I just blown away. No, not blown away, but it was the interaction. And I realised, maybe something had transmitted here between something that he really cared about, which was kids. And as simple as doing things with his kids meant something to him much more than his bigger, wider world or tripping around the world and trying to figure out, get teams to work together in terms of dental stuff. And some of the technology they're using was amazing. But isn't that interesting? Down to that kind of really earthy, dusty, life. Yes. That was meaningful.
Yes.
Yeah, he discovered the meaning in that moment again.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that to him meant an awful lot, I think, as he walked out of that, catch his plane. It kind of got me thinking too, because I thought, that was kind of it was a good moment. Not by what I said, just by the conversation that we had.
Yeah, that's really good, man.
Interesting, eh? So meaning is much more human.
Yeah.
Much more interactive, much more relationship.
Yep.
And that's where I think technology undoes us. It doesn't, necessarily give us relationship.